A security guard saves a woman from a kidnapper, but the next day she shows up with news that leaves him completely speechless. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Jack Reynolds checked his watch as he walked across the empty mall parking lot, rain pelting his security uniform. The night shift, another solitary stretch of time, keeping him away from the memories that haunted his empty apartment. 3 years since he'd buried Sarah, and still, the silence when he returned home each morning was almost unbearable. The mall had closed 2 hours ago. His footsteps echoed against the concrete as he made his routine perimeter check, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The job wasn't much, a significant step down from his police detective days, but that was precisely why he'd taken it. No high stakes, no life or death decisions, just empty corridors and the occasional teenage shoplifter. A flash of Sarah's face appeared in his mind, pale against the hospital pillow, her once vibrant eyes dulled by pain medication. The doctors had given her 6 months. She'd fought for 8. Not now, he muttered, pushing the memory away as he'd done countless times before. He pulled his collar higher against the relentless downpour and continued his patrol. That's when he heard it. A muffled scream cutting through the night air. Jack froze, his senses suddenly alert. For a moment he wondered if he'd imagined it, if his exhausted mind was playing tricks. Then it came again, a desperate, choked cry from the far end of the parking lot. His body responded before his mind could catch up, muscle memory from years of training taking over. He broke into a run, rain blurring his vision as he navigated between parked cars. His hand instinctively reached for the weapon that wasn't there anymore, finding instead the standard-issue baton security guards were permitted to carry. Through the curtain of rain, he spotted them, a dark van with its side door open, a man in a black ski mask struggling with a woman who fought with desperate intensity. The man was trying to drag her into the vehicle. "Security! Stop right there!" Jack's voice emerged with an authority he hadn't used in years, startling even himself with its commanding presence. The masked man's head snapped toward him, hesitating just long enough for the woman to wrench partially free. Jack closed the distance in seconds, bringing his baton across to block the attacker's arm as he reached again for the woman. "Let her go, now!" Jack positioned himself between the attacker and the woman, feeling a long dormant part of himself awakening. The officer, the protector. The masked man lunged, surprisingly agile. Jack blocked the first blow, but caught a sharp jab to his ribs that knocked the wind from him. Recovering quickly, he countered with a strike that connected solidly. The attacker stumbled back against the van. For a few tense seconds, they grappled in the rain until Jack managed to gain the upper hand, slamming the man against the vehicle's metal frame. But the attacker slipped from his grasp with unexpected strength, diving into the van. The engine roared to life, tires squealing as it sped away, disappearing into the darkness. Breathing heavily, Jack turned to the woman. She was trembling, her brown hair plastered to her face by the rain, blue eyes wide with terror. At her feet lay a violin case now soaked by the downpour. "I'm Jack Reynolds, mall security," he said, his voice gentler now. "You're safe. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, water droplets cascading from her hair. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely audible above the rain. "I don't know what would have happened if you—" She broke off, wrapping her arms tightly around herself. Jack noticed she wore elegant concert attire, a black dress that suggested she'd performed somewhere earlier that evening. He bent down to retrieve her violin case. "I'm Emma," she offered, taking the case with shaking hands. "Emma Lawson. I just finished a performance at the community theater across the street. I was heading to my car when he grabbed me." "Let's get you inside," Jack said, glancing toward the mall entrance. "We'll call the police, get you something warm to drink." The security office was a small room tucked away near the service corridors. Ramirez, the other guard on duty, looked up in surprise as Jack ushered Emma in. "Dios mío, what happened?" Ramirez asked, immediately reaching for the electric kettle they kept for long night shifts. Attempted abduction in the parking lot, Jack replied, grabbing a blanket from the emergency kit and offering it to Emma. Call it in. While Ramirez made the call, Jack pulled a chair out for Emma. The police will be here soon. Can I get you anything? Just some water, please. Her voice was steadier now, though her hands still trembled as she set her violin case carefully under the table. Jack handed her a paper cup of water, noticing how her fingers lingered briefly against his, a momentary human connection that felt unfamiliar after years of isolation. 20 minutes later, Detective Chen walked through the door. Jack hadn't seen his former partner since resigning from the force, and the familiar face brought a rush of complicated emotions. Reynolds, Chen nodded, a hint of surprise in his eyes. Didn't expect to see you involved in something like this. I work here now, Jack replied simply. Chen turned his attention to Emma, taking out his notepad. Ms. Lawson, I'm Detective Chen. Can you tell me exactly what happened? Emma recounted the attack, her composer's precision evident in the detailed timeline she provided. When Chen asked if she recognized her attacker, Jack noticed a flicker of hesitation cross her face. No, she said after a moment. He wore a mask. I never saw his face. Chen continued questioning her for another 20 minutes, jotting notes and nodding occasionally. When he finished, he handed Emma his card. If you remember anything else, call me directly. As Emma gathered her things, Chen pulled Jack aside. You still got those instincts, Reynolds, he said quietly. Second incident in that parking lot this month. Jack frowned. Second, attempted abduction 2 weeks ago. Similar pattern. Professional woman, alone at night. Perp got away that time, too. Chen studied Jack's face. You ever think about coming back to the force? No, Jack answered too quickly. The memories surfaced unbidden. The hostage situation gone wrong, followed by Sarah's diagnosis weeks later. Too much loss, too much failure. Chen seemed to understand. Well, if you change your mind. He left the sentence unfinished, patting Jack's shoulder before turning to leave. Jack offered to walk Emma to the taxi they'd called for her. The rain had eased to a drizzle and the parking lot glistened under the security lights. Thank you again, Emma said as they approached the waiting cab. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. Just doing my job. She smiled for the first time since the attack, transforming her face. I think we both know that's not true. You went above and beyond. Her fingers touched his arm briefly, leaving a warmth that surprised him. I have another performance tomorrow night, here at the mall's community space. I'd like you to come, if you can, as a thank you. Before Jack could respond, Emma's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and he watched as the color drained from her face. I need to go, she said abruptly, climbing into the taxi. Jack watched the cab pull away, an uneasy feeling settling in his stomach. Something wasn't right, but he couldn't place it. With a sigh, he turned to resume his patrol, sweeping his flashlight across the still wet pavement. That's when he saw it. A small flash drive lying in a puddle. He picked it up, examining the tiny device. The initials EL were engraved on its metal casing. Emma Lawson. Jack pocketed the drive, intending to return it if she came for her performance tomorrow. As he continued his patrol, the uneasy feeling refused to dissipate. Why had she hesitated when asked if she recognized her attacker? And who had called, sending her fleeing into the night with fear in her eyes? He completed his rounds mechanically, his mind still on the woman with the violin and the terror in her blue eyes. For the first time in years, Jack felt something stir within him. A sense of purpose, of curiosity, of caring what happened to another human being. Looking at the flash drive in his hand, Jack had no idea that the small device contained secrets that would completely transform his quiet, solitary existence. Jack twirled the flash drive between his fingers, watching the fluorescent lights of the security office reflect off its metallic surface. He'd spent most of the morning shift distracted, wondering if Emma Lawson would actually return for her scheduled performance that evening. The drive felt unusually heavy in his hand, a small object carrying someone else's secrets. "You look like you're solving the mysteries of the universe there, Reynolds," Ramirez said, sliding a cup of coffee across the desk. Jack pocketed the drive. "Just thinking. About the woman from last night? Can't blame you. Not every day a hero gets a damsel in distress to rescue." Ramirez grinned. Jack was about to respond when the security office door opened. Emma Lawson stood in the doorway, but not as he remembered her from the previous night. Her confident posture was gone, replaced by a visible tension that seemed to pull her shoulders forward. Instead of the elegant concert attire, she wore simple jeans and a sweater. Most striking was the manila folder clutched tightly against her chest. "Jack," she said, her voice steady despite her appearance. "I need to speak with you. In private." Ramirez raised his eyebrows, but took the hint. "I'll go check the north entrance cameras. Been glitchy all morning." He slipped past Emma with a nod. Once the door closed, Jack gestured toward the empty chair. "I found something of yours last night." He produced the flash drive. "Your initials are on it." Emma glanced at the drive but made no move to take it. "Thank you, but that's the least of my concerns right now." She sank into the chair, placing the folder on the desk between them. "Is there somewhere more private we could talk?" "Not here." 20 minutes later, they sat on a bench in the mall's indoor garden, positioned far from shoppers and surrounded by the white noise of a small fountain. The space offered a semblance of privacy, without truly being alone. Exactly what Jack preferred for this unexpected meeting. "Here." Jack handed the flash drive to Emma, who took it with a distracted nod. "Thank you, but as I said, this is the least of my problems now." She opened the folder, revealing what Jack now recognized as medical documents. "The man last night, I know who he was." Jack straightened. "You told Detective Chen you didn't recognize him." "I lied." Emma's blue eyes met his without flinching. "It was my ex-husband, David. He has severe psychiatric issues, has been stalking me for months. I have a restraining order, but..." She trailed off, gesturing helplessly. "We need to inform the police immediately," Jack said, already reaching for his phone. "This changes everything about the investigation." "Wait." Emma placed her hand on his arm, stopping him. "There's more." She drew a deep breath. "I had some tests done last week. This morning I received the results." She pulled out a document with medical letterhead and handed it to Jack. He skimmed the technical language, but certain phrases jumped out in stark relief. Inoperable brain tumor, aggressive progression, palliative options, and finally, the devastating timeline. Estimated 6 months. The world seemed to slow around Jack, the fountain's burble fading to a distant hum. He'd heard those same clinical words 3 years earlier, sitting beside Sarah as a different doctor delivered their own death sentence. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the water. Emma reclaimed the document, sliding it back into the folder. "Because you saved me yesterday, but there's no saving me today." Her voice trembled slightly before steadying again. "And because I saw something in your eyes when you protected me. You understand loss." Jack looked away, uncomfortable with how accurately she'd read him. "I'm sorry about your diagnosis." "I'm not looking for pity," Emma replied, her composure returning. "But I need to be practical now. David knows about my condition. He's become more unstable, more threatening. He says if he can't have me in life, he'll make sure I'm remembered how he wants after my death." Jack studied her face, noting the determination beneath the fatigue. "What can I do?" "Nothing. Everything." She smiled faintly. "For now, just come to my performance tonight if you can. Music is what I have left." Against his better judgment, Jack found himself in the back row of the mall's community performance space that evening. He'd changed from his security uniform into simple civilian clothes, feeling strangely vulnerable without the authority the uniform provided. The small venue was about half full when Emma took the stage. She wore a simple black dress, different from the previous night but equally elegant. Without introduction, she raised her violin to her shoulder and began to play. Jack knew nothing about classical music, yet something in her performance reached past his ignorance. Each note seemed to carry emotion too complex for words: grief, defiance, yearning. Her body swayed slightly with the music, her eyes closed in complete absorption. This was not the frightened woman from the parking lot, nor the resigned patient from that morning. This was someone transformed, powerful in her vulnerability. When the final note faded, the audience sat in stunned silence before erupting into applause. Emma opened her eyes, seeming almost surprised to find people watching. She acknowledged the applause with a modest nod before quickly leaving the stage. Jack waited near the exit, uncertain whether she would want to see him. When she emerged carrying her violin case, her face brightened with recognition. "You came," she said, genuine pleasure in her voice. "I said I would." Jack offered to carry her violin case. "Let me walk you to your car." They were halfway across the parking lot when Jack noticed a figure moving between parked vehicles. His body tensed, instinctively positioning himself between Emma and the potential threat. "Emma," a man's voice called out, rough with emotion. "I just want to talk." Emma froze. "It's David," she whispered, her hand gripping Jack's arm. The man emerged into the light of a street lamp. Tall, thin, with disheveled hair and wild eyes, he looked nothing like the composed attacker from the previous night. But the desperation in his face was unmistakable. "Security!" Jack shouted, hoping Ramirez was monitoring the exterior cameras. "Step back now!" Instead of retreating, David lurched forward. "She's mine! You don't understand what she's done!" Jack pushed Emma toward the mall entrance. "Run! Go inside and find Ramirez." What followed was a frantic chase through the emptying mall. Jack could hear David's footsteps pounding behind them as they weaved through corridors and service hallways. He guided Emma into a vacant storefront, pulling the security gate partially closed behind them. "My radio's in my locker," Jack whispered, cursing himself for coming as a civilian. "Stay down." Emma crouched behind a display case, her breath coming in short gasps. "The flash drive," she said urgently. "That's what he's really after." "The flash drive?" Jack peered through the security gate, watching for movement. "It contains all my compositions, finished and unfinished. My legacy. It's all I'll leave behind." Her voice caught. "David wants to destroy it, control what remains of me after I'm gone." Heavy footsteps approached, then passed their hiding place. Jack held his breath until the sound faded. "Why didn't you tell the police about him yesterday?" "Because I didn't want to spend my remaining months dealing with restraining orders and court appearances," Emma replied. "I just want to complete my final composition in peace." A crackling voice from the mall's PA system interrupted them. "Security alert, South Corridor. Security alert, South Corridor." "That's Ramirez," Jack said. "He must have spotted David on the cameras." They remained hidden until Jack heard the familiar voice of his colleague approaching with mall security backup. When they finally emerged, David was nowhere to be seen. Back in the security office, Jack reviewed the surveillance footage with Ramirez. Emma sat nearby, cradling her violin case like a child. "There," Jack pointed to a figure on the screen. "That's him entering the north entrance." "And there he is leaving through the food court," Ramirez added. 17 minutes later. Jack frowned, studying the footage more closely. "Wait, go back to when he first entered." Ramirez rewound the tape. "Look, he's on his phone. It's like he's getting directions." Emma leaned forward. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying David might not be acting alone," Jack replied. "It looks like someone was guiding him through the mall, telling him where to go." The next few weeks developed a pattern Jack had never anticipated. His free time, once spent in solitary silence at his apartment, now revolved around Emma. Together they created what she called her living list. Places to visit, experiences to have in the months remaining to her. Jack told himself he was simply helping someone in need, using his security background to protect a vulnerable woman. But as days stretched into weeks, something deeper formed between them. A connection forged in shared understanding of mortality's shadow. They watched sunrise from a beachside cliff, Emma insisting on bringing her violin to capture the moment in music. They visited art museums where she explained compositions inspired by famous paintings. And late one night, after she had composed for hours in his presence, Emma confessed something that shook Jack to his core. "I've never felt so alive as I have these days with you, Jack," she said, her fingers still warm from the violin strings as they brushed against his hand. "Isn't that the cruelest irony? To finally understand what living feels like when time is running out?" That same night, while Jack drove Emma home, a call came from her neighbor. Emma's apartment door stood open, lights blazing inside. They arrived to find devastation, music sheets torn and scattered, furniture overturned, her piano lid scratched with deep gouges. But most disturbing was the message scrawled across her living room wall in red paint, the words sending a chill down Jack's spine. "You belong to me, in life and in death." 3 months had passed since Emma's apartment was vandalized. Autumn leaves were giving way to the first frosts of winter, and Jack Reynolds found himself living a life he couldn't have imagined at summer's end. He stood in the personnel office of Westfield Mall, finalizing paperwork for his leave of absence. "You sure about this, Reynolds?" asked Linda from HR, peering at him over reading glasses. 6 months is a long time to be away." "I'm sure," Jack replied, signing the final form. "I've got the vacation time saved up, plus the personal leave. I need to do this." What he didn't say was that Emma's condition had begun deteriorating more rapidly than expected. The headaches had intensified, and last week she'd experienced her first seizure. The doctors had adjusted their timeline downward, 4 months, perhaps less. Jack intended to be there for every day she had left. "Well, the position will be waiting when you return," Linda said, her expression softening. "Ramirez is going to miss you, you know." Jack managed a small smile. "Tell him I'll bring back some mountain trout if he behaves himself." An hour later, Jack loaded the last of Emma's luggage into his weathered Jeep Cherokee. Her violin case, the one constant in her increasingly uncertain life, rested carefully on the back seat. "That's everything," he said, closing the trunk. "You ready?" Emma nodded, her face pale but her eyes bright with anticipation. "More than ready. I've been dreaming about your mysterious mountain cabin since you first mentioned it." The drive took them 3 hours north, away from the city sprawl, through increasingly rural landscapes, and finally onto winding mountain roads where cell reception faded in and out. Emma dozed for part of the journey, the medication making her drowsy. Jack found himself glancing over at her sleeping form, struck by how quickly she had become essential to his life, and how cruelly brief their time would be. The cabin appeared around a final bend, a simple structure of wood and stone nestled against the backdrop of pine forest with a clear view of a small mountain lake. Not grand by any measure, but solid and private, built by Jack's grandfather decades ago and maintained meticulously since. "It's perfect," Emma whispered as they pulled up, her eyes taking in the rustic charm of the place. "So peaceful." "Wait until you see the view from the porch at sunset," Jack said, helping her from the car. "The lake catches the light in a way that—" "That what?" Emma prompted when he trailed off. Jack shook his head. "That Sarah loved. My wife used to paint it." Emma squeezed his hand. "Thank you for sharing this place with me." Inside, the cabin was exactly as Jack remembered, knotty pine walls, stone fireplace, simple furnishings built for comfort rather than style. What wasn't there? When he'd last visited was the upright piano now occupying the corner of the main room. Emma gasped. "How did you—" "I called in some favors," Jack said, enjoying the surprise on her face. "Had it delivered and tuned yesterday. Thought you might want to keep composing." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she approached the instrument, running her fingers reverently over the keys. "No one has ever done something like this for me." That evening, after Jack had built a fire and prepared a simple dinner, they sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of amber and gold. "I never asked," Emma said suddenly, "why you left the police." Jack tensed, his hand tightening around his coffee mug. He'd known this question would come eventually. "You don't have to tell me," she added quickly. "I just realized I know so little about you, even though you've rearranged your entire life to care for me." "There was an incident," Jack said finally, his voice low. "A hostage situation in a convenience store. Armed suspect, 3 civilians trapped inside. I was lead negotiator." He paused, the memories flooding back with surprising clarity. "I made a judgment call. Thought the suspect was surrendering. He wasn't." Jack stared into the darkening forest. "A woman died. Young mother. After that, I couldn't do it anymore. And then Sarah got sick, and it was too much." Emma didn't offer empty platitudes or tell him it wasn't his fault. Instead, she simply leaned against his shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of his pain. "Thank you for telling me," she said after a while. "And thank you for this place. It's perfect." Later, as Jack prepared dinner in the kitchen, the sound of Emma's piano filled the cabin, haunting melodies that seemed to capture both the beauty of their surroundings and the bittersweet nature of their time together. So absorbed was he in the music that he almost missed the flash of headlights through the trees. Jack froze. The cabin was remote, accessible only by a private road. They weren't expecting visitors. Moving silently, he crossed to the drawer where he kept his old service weapon. He hadn't touched it in years, but muscle memory took over as he checked the chamber and clicked off the safety. The headlights grew brighter as the vehicle approached. Jack positioned himself by the window, angling to see without being seen. "Emma," he called softly, "move away from the windows, please." The piano music stopped abruptly. "What is it?" "Someone's coming. Probably nothing, but let's be careful." The vehicle came to a stop beside Jack's Jeep, a familiar sedan that made him relax slightly. Detective Chen stepped out, looking up at the cabin with a grim expression. Jack tucked the gun into the back of his jeans and opened the door as Chen approached. "Reynolds," Chen nodded. "Sorry to drop in unannounced. Tried calling but couldn't get through." "Cell service is spotty up here," Jack replied, stepping aside. "Come in." Inside, Emma had risen from the piano bench, her face tense. "Is everything all right?" Chen removed his hat, nodding politely to Emma. "Ms. Lawson, sorry to interrupt your evening." "What brings you all the way up here?" Jack asked, not bothering to hide his suspicion. It was a long drive from the city, not one made on a whim. Chen sighed. "I've got some information you both need to hear, about David Lawson." Emma sank back onto the piano bench. "Has he been caught?" "That's just it," Chen said, looking uncomfortable. "We've been trying to track him down since the vandalism at your apartment. Finally got access to his medical records." He paused. "David was admitted to psychiatric inpatient care the day you were attacked in the parking lot. He's been institutionalized ever since." The silence that followed was deafening. "That's impossible," Emma whispered. "I saw him. Both at the parking lot and at the mall after my performance. We verified with hospital security and staff. He hasn't left the facility," Chen insisted. "Whoever attacked you, whoever trashed your apartment, it wasn't your ex-husband." Jack felt a cold sensation spreading through his chest. If not David, Then who? Chen hesitated, glancing between them. There's something else. I had a colleague check with the hospital you mentioned, about your diagnosis. Emma's face drained of color. They have no record of any brain tumor diagnosis for you, Ms. Lawson. No scans, no consultations, nothing. The room seemed to tilt around Jack. He looked at Emma, whose expression had transformed from shock to something he couldn't quite read. Fear? Guilt? There must be some mistake, she said, her voice thin. Chen shook his head. I don't think so. Which makes me wonder what else isn't what it seems. After Chen departed, promising to return the next day with more information, a heavy silence filled the cabin. Emma stood by the piano, her back to Jack, her fingers tracing patterns on the polished wood. You lied about everything? Jack finally asked, his voice hollow with devastation. Emma turned slowly to face him. In the lamplight, she looked different somehow, less fragile, more composed despite the tears in her eyes. Not about feeling something for you, she said softly. But yes, I lied about the tumor and about David. I needed protection. Protection from what? Jack demanded, anger beginning to replace shock. Do you even play violin, or was that part of the act too? Of course I play. That was real. Emma took a step toward him, then stopped when she saw him stiffen. Everything I shared about music, about my compositions, that was all true. But you're not dying. No. And David wasn't stalking you. No. Jack ran a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of it all. Then what the hell is going on, Emma? Who attacked you that night? Who trashed your apartment? And why the elaborate lie about a terminal illness? Before Emma could answer, the sound of shattering glass exploded from the bedroom. Jack instinctively reached for his weapon as the front door burst open simultaneously. 3 men in tactical gear swarmed into the cabin. Jack managed to fire once before something hard struck the back of his head. As he fell, he heard Emma scream. Through blurring vision, he saw a 4th man enter, tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that seemed absurdly out of place in the rustic cabin. Emma Lawson, the man said, his voice cultured and calm. How disappointing to find you hiding in this... He glanced around with distaste. Wilderness. Royce, please. Emma's voice sounded distant to Jack's ringing ears. You don't have to do this. On the contrary, my dear, you've left me no choice. The man, Royce, gestured to one of his companions. Bring her, and make sure she has that violin. It's quite valuable. Jack struggled to remain conscious, to reach for his fallen weapon. One of the men noticed his movement and delivered a sharp kick to his ribs. Pain exploded through his body. What about him? Someone asked. He's seen my face, Royce replied dispassionately. Can't leave witnesses. The last thing Jack heard before darkness claimed him was the sound of a gunshot, and Emma's desperate cry of his name. While Emma finally drifted into uneasy sleep under Jack's watchful gaze, in a prison cell miles away, Royce Carter smiled into the phone. No matter how many guards they assign, you know what to do. She cannot reach the courthouse alive next week. The steady beep of a heart monitor pulled Jack back to consciousness. His eyelids felt heavy as he forced them open, greeted by the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room. Sharp pain throbbed in his side when he tried to move. Easy there, hero. Detective Chen leaned forward in a chair beside the bed. The bullet grazed your ribs. Could have been much worse. Memory flooded back. The cabin invasion, Emma's terrified face. The well-dressed man called Royce. Emma, Jack croaked, his throat dry. Where is she? Chen's expression darkened. Carter took her. Royce Carter. Who is he? The kind of wealthy that buys influence instead of earning it, Chen replied, passing Jack a cup of water. CEO of Carter Enterprises and chairman of the Carter Foundation for Cancer Research. Jack nearly choked on the water. Cancer research? Ironic, isn't it? Chen produced a tablet and pulled up a photo of Royce Carter cutting a ribbon at a hospital wing. He's made millions as a philanthropist, fighting cancer while secretly laundering money through those same charities. Jack closed his eyes, pieces starting to align. And Emma? Emma Lawson is an FBI informant, Chen said, pulling out a badge Jack hadn't seen before. I'm not just homicide, Reynolds. I've been working this case for 18 months. You've been lying to me, too. Jack's voice was flat with resignation. Compartmentalized information, standard procedure. Chen tapped the tablet, bringing up a photo of Emma in professional attire. Emma was hired as a musician for Carter's private events 3 years ago. She noticed financial discrepancies, started asking questions. When her brother died of cancer, after participating in one of Carter's experimental treatment programs, she approached the FBI. Jack struggled to reconcile the Emma he knew with this new information. So the attack in the mall parking lot? Carter's men. They discovered she was gathering evidence. The violin case had a hidden camera. And the brain tumor diagnosis? Her cover story, for you. Chen looked genuinely apologetic. She needed protection, but couldn't risk bringing you into the operation officially. If Carter suspected you knew anything, you'd be eliminated. She used me, Jack said, the betrayal burning more painfully than his wound. Used my history with Sarah to manipulate me. Chen didn't deny it. She did what she needed to survive, but for what it's worth, I don't think she expected to care about you. Jack turned his face away, unwilling to let Chen see how deeply Emma's deception had cut him. Where did they take her? Based on chatter we've intercepted, Carter's keeping her close. There's a major charity gala for the Carter Foundation tomorrow night. He'll want her there, playing the dutiful musician one last time before disposing of her. And the evidence she collected? Chen's expression tightened. That's the problem. Without it, we have nothing solid on Carter. Our theory is she's hidden it somewhere only she can access. Jack stared out the hospital window, watching snowflakes drifting past, empty whiteness like the void inside him. I want in, he said finally. You're injured. I want in, Jack repeated, meeting Chen's gaze steadily. I don't care about your operation or Carter's empire, but I'm going to make sure Emma lives through tomorrow night. The grand ballroom of the Renaissance Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and wealth. Men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns mingled, champagne flowing freely as string quartet music floated through the air. Banners proclaimed the evening's purpose: 10th Annual Carter Foundation Gala for Cancer Research. Jack adjusted his bow tie, uncomfortable in the rented tuxedo, the bandages beneath his shirt pulled with every movement, a constant reminder of what was at stake. In his ear, a discreet communication device connected him to Chen and the FBI team, positioned throughout the venue. Status update, came Chen's voice. Carter just arrived through the VIP entrance. Emma's with him. Jack moved casually toward the main ballroom, nodding politely to other guests. The FBI had created a cover identity for him as a potential donor, complete with forged credentials that would withstand cursory inspection. He spotted them immediately. Royce Carter stood at the center of an admiring circle, charm personified in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Beside him, Emma wore a floor-length white gown, her violin case held in front of her like a shield. Even from a distance, Jack could see the strain behind her polite smile. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Surprise flashed across Emma's face, followed by unmistakable relief, then fear. She quickly looked away, but not before Carter noticed her reaction. The businessman glanced in Jack's direction, eyes narrowing slightly. He's seen me, Jack murmured into his concealed mic. Maintain cover, Chen instructed. We need to wait until Carter makes his speech before making any move. The next hour was excruciating. Jack circulated through the crowd, pretending interest in conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes, all while keeping Emma in his peripheral vision. Carter never left her side, one hand possessively placed on her lower back or shoulder. Finally, the moment arrived for the evening's entertainment. Carter guided Emma to the small stage where a grand piano waited. He tapped a microphone, silencing the room. "Distinguished guests, I'm delighted to introduce our special performer for the evening. Emma Lawson's talent has graced our events for several years, and tonight she's prepared an original composition in honor of our foundation's work." The applause was polite as Emma took her position, removing her violin from its case. Jack noticed something he hadn't seen before, an elegant pendant hanging from a thin chain around her neck. Not present the last time he'd seen her. Emma raised her bow and began to play. The melody started hauntingly simple, then evolved into something complex and beautiful. Jack wasn't a musician, but even he could tell this was extraordinary work. The room fell silent under its spell. As he watched her play, Jack noticed a pattern in her hand movements, subtle variations that seemed deliberate. It took him a moment to recognize what he was seeing: Morse code. Slowly, he deciphered the message tapped out through her music: PENDRIVECOLAR. Pendrive collar. The necklace. When the piece concluded, the audience erupted in genuine appreciation. Emma acknowledged it with a modest nod, her eyes briefly finding Jack's again. Carter immediately reclaimed her, leading her toward the bar for a celebratory drink. "She's trying to tell us something about her necklace," Jack whispered to Chen. "I think that's where the evidence is." "Copy that. We need a distraction to separate them." The opportunity came sooner than expected. A server accidentally bumped into Carter, spilling champagne on his tuxedo. While the flustered staff attended to the stain, Emma slipped away, moving quickly toward a quiet corridor leading to the restrooms. Jack intercepted her there, pulling her into a service alcove. "You're alive," she breathed, reaching toward his chest, then stopping herself. "I thought they killed you." "Why did you lie to me?" Jack demanded, ignoring the relief in her eyes. "Because I needed you to believe I was dying," Emma replied, glancing nervously toward the ballroom. "If Carter suspected I was collecting evidence, he would have killed me immediately. But then I really fell in love with you, Jack. That wasn't part of the plan." "Love?" Jack's laugh was bitter. "You manipulated everything from the start. Used my wife's memory, my grief." "Your wife," Emma interrupted, eyes flashing. "Do you know where the money went that was supposed to fund research for her type of cancer? Carter's offshore accounts. Luxury properties. That's what I'm fighting against." Before Jack could respond, heavy footsteps approached. Emma pressed something into his palm, a small card with a room number. "Meet me there after Carter's speech," she whispered. "I'll explain everything." She slipped back into the corridor, composing her features just as one of Carter's security personnel rounded the corner. Jack returned to the ballroom, the card burning in his pocket. Chen's voice came through his earpiece. "We're ready to move after Carter's speech. Stay in position." On stage, Carter was already beginning his address, speaking passionately about breakthrough treatments his foundation had supposedly funded. Emma stood to his right, the pendant gleaming against her white gown. Jack positioned himself near a service exit, ready to create a distraction if needed. He watched Emma's face, noting how she maintained a perfect mask of admiration while Carter spoke about saving lives. Lives he had effectively sentenced to death by diverting research funds. Suddenly, Jack noticed movement in his peripheral vision. FBI agents positioning themselves around the room's perimeter. Something was happening ahead of schedule. Carter must have noticed too. Mid-sentence, he paused, eyes scanning the crowd. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her close, whispering something in her ear. Her face went pale. "He's made us," Chen's voice crackled, moving to intercept now. But Carter was already backing toward a side door, dragging Emma with him. Jack moved immediately, cutting through the confused crowd as the first shouts of FBI rang through the ballroom. By the time he reached the door, Carter and Emma had disappeared into a service corridor. Jack followed, hearing footsteps pounding up a stairwell ahead. He took the stairs two at a time, pain flaring in his side with each step. He emerged onto the hotel's rooftop terrace, cold winter air stealing his breath. Carter stood near the edge, one arm locked around Emma's neck, the other holding a pistol to her temple. Behind them, the city lights stretched into the distance, oblivious to the drama unfolding 20 stories above. "Stay back," Carter shouted as Jack appeared, followed moments later by Chen and two other agents, weapons drawn. "It's over, Carter," Chen called. "The exits are covered. Your security team is already in custody." "Nothing's over," Carter snarled. "You don't understand what I've built. Those cancer patients, they would die anyway. At least their money served a useful purpose." Jack took a careful step forward. "Like my wife?" Carter frowned. "Who?" "Sarah Reynolds. She died 3 years ago, believing your foundation would help others with her type of cancer. But you stole even that from her." For a split second, Carter's attention wavered, his grip on Emma loosening just enough. In that moment, Emma reached up and tore the pendant from her neck, throwing it toward Jack before driving her elbow hard into Carter's stomach. The gun went off. Emma crumpled to the ground as FBI agents rushed forward, subduing Carter. Jack lunged for the pendant, then ran to where Emma lay. Blood spread across her white dress in a growing stain. "The pen drive," she gasped, clutching at his hand. "It has everything. Evidence of all the schemes." She coughed, a trickle of blood appearing at the corner of her mouth. "I didn't lie about one thing, the compositions. They're for you, Jack." As medical personnel rushed onto the terrace, Jack held Emma's hand, watching her eyes flutter closed. The pendant, a hollow locket containing a tiny flash drive, felt impossibly heavy in his other hand, weighted with truth, justice, and the cost of both. "Stay with me, Emma," he whispered. "Please stay." While the FBI arrested Carter, Jack ran to Emma. The blood spreading through her white dress told him everything he needed to know about the cost of justice. The grand ballroom of the Renaissance Hotel gleamed like a diamond under the golden light of crystal chandeliers. Jack Reynolds adjusted his bow tie for the third time, the unfamiliar sensation of formal wear making him more uncomfortable than the bandages wrapped tightly around his torso. His rented tuxedo concealed both his injuries and the wire taped carefully to his chest. "Audio check," came Chen's voice through the nearly invisible earpiece. "You're clear on the plan?" "Crystal," Jack murmured, accepting a flute of champagne from a passing server while scanning the room. "I'm just another potential donor until you give, Mo, the signal." The ballroom pulsed with wealth and privilege. Men in tailored tuxedos and women draped in designer gowns laughed and clinked glasses, their casual displays of opulence a stark contrast to the charity banners proclaiming 10th Annual Carter Foundation Gala for Cancer Research. Jack felt a familiar bitterness rise in his throat. These people had no idea they were toasting a criminal who diverted cancer research funds to offshore accounts, funds that might have saved Sarah and countless others. "Heads up," Chen warned. "VIP entrance, east side." Jack turned casually, pretending to admire a nearby ice sculpture. Through the crowd, he spotted Royce Carter making his entrance, a practiced smile plastered across his patrician features. The businessman nodded graciously to admirers, accepting congratulations and praise with false humility. And there, slightly behind him, was Emma. Jack's breath caught. She wore a floor-length white gown that seemed to capture and reflect the room's light, making her appear almost luminous. Her dark hair was swept up elegantly, exposing the graceful line of her neck. In her hands, she clutched her violin case like a lifeline. Despite her composed exterior, Jack recognized the tension in her shoulders, the carefully controlled fear in her eyes. Those eyes suddenly met his across the crowded room. He watched emotions flash across her face in rapid succession: surprise, relief, fear, before she quickly looked away. But not quickly enough. Carter noticed the momentary lapse, following her gaze directly to Jack. "He's seen me," Jack whispered into his concealed microphone as Carter's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Maintain your cover," Chen replied. "We need him comfortable before we move." For the next hour, Jack circulated through the room, making small talk with other guests while keeping Emma in his peripheral vision. Carter never strayed from her side, one hand constantly maintaining physical contact, on her elbow, her shoulder, the small of her back. The possessive gesture made Jack's jaw clench with barely suppressed anger. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice announced over the sound system, "please take your seats. Tonight's program will begin shortly." Jack found a table near the back of the room, positioning himself with a clear view of the small stage where a grand piano awaited. Carter guided Emma forward as the room settled, tapping a microphone to capture everyone's attention. "Distinguished guests and generous supporters," Carter began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "I'm delighted to introduce our special performer for this evening. Emma Lawson's exceptional talent has graced our foundation events for several years. Tonight, she's prepared an original composition in honor of our ongoing fight against cancer." Polite applause rippled through the room as Emma stepped forward, removing her violin from its case with practiced grace. Jack noticed something new, an elegant pendant hanging from a thin chain around her neck, catching the light with each movement. As Emma positioned the violin beneath her chin, her eyes briefly found Jack's again. A silent message passed between them before she closed her eyes and began to play. The music started softly, almost tentatively, before building into something complex and hauntingly beautiful. The room fell silent under its spell, conversations ceasing, waitstaff freezing in place, everyone captivated by the raw emotion pouring from each note. But Jack noticed something else, a subtle pattern in Emma's hand movements. Having spent 3 months with her, watching her perform countless times, he recognized these variations didn't belong to the music itself. With sudden clarity, he realized she was tapping out Morse code with the rhythm of certain notes: PENDRIVECOLAR. "The pendant," Jack whispered into his mic. "She's saying the evidence is in her necklace." "Copy that," Chen replied. "We need a distraction to separate them after the performance." When the final note faded, the audience erupted in genuine appreciation. Emma acknowledged it with a modest nod before Carter immediately reclaimed her, guiding her toward the bar for a celebratory drink. Fate provided their needed distraction when a server stumbled, spilling champagne across Carter's immaculate tuxedo. As staff rushed to remedy the situation, Emma seized the moment, slipping away toward a corridor leading to the restrooms. Jack intercepted her in the quiet hallway, pulling her into a service alcove away from prying eyes and surveillance cameras. "You're alive," she breathed, relief flooding her features as she reached toward his chest, then stopped herself. "I thought they killed you at the cabin." "Why did you lie to me?" Jack demanded, ignoring the part of him that wanted to pull her close, to protect her from everything, including herself. "Because I needed you to believe I was dying," Emma replied, glancing nervously toward the ballroom. "If Carter suspected I was collecting evidence, he would have killed me immediately." Her voice softened. "But then I really fell in love with you, Jack. That wasn't part of the plan." "Love?" Jack's laugh held no humor. "You manipulated everything from the beginning, used my wife's memory, my grief." "Your wife," Emma interrupted, her eyes flashing with unexpected fire. "Do you know where the money went that was supposed to fund research for her type of cancer? Carter's offshore accounts, luxury properties, bribes to silence critics." She took a shaky breath. "Everything I did was to expose him, to get justice for my brother, for your wife, for everyone he's stolen from." Footsteps approached from the main corridor, Emma quickly pressed a small card into Jack's palm. "Room 1242, she whispered. "Meet me there after Carter's speech. I'll explain everything." She slipped back into the hallway, composing her features just as one of Carter's security personnel rounded the corner. Jack waited until they were gone before rejoining the gala, the keycard burning in his pocket like a brand. "We're ready to move after Carter's speech," Chen informed him through the earpiece. "Stay in position and be ready." Carter was already at the podium when Jack re-entered the ballroom, speaking passionately about breakthrough treatments, supposedly funded by his foundation. Emma stood slightly behind him, her face a perfect mask of admiration. Only Jack could see the tension in her clasped hands, the subtle tremor in her shoulders. "Thanks to your generous support," Carter continued, "we've increased survival rates for patients in our experimental treatment programs by 17% this year alone." Jack positioned himself near a service exit, muscles tensed for action. Something didn't feel right. He scanned the room, noticing FBI agents moving into position around the perimeter earlier than planned. Carter noticed too. Mid-sentence, he faltered, eyes narrowing as they swept across the crowd. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her close, whispering something that drained the color from her face. "He's made us!" Chen's urgent voice came through the earpiece. "Moving to intercept now." But Carter was already backing toward a side door, dragging Emma with him. Jack moved immediately, cutting through the startled crowd as the first shouts of "FBI! Freeze!" shattered the elegant atmosphere. By the time he reached the door, Carter and Emma had disappeared into a service corridor. Jack followed, hearing footsteps pounding up a stairwell ahead. He took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the burning pain in his side that threatened to double him over. He emerged onto the hotel's rooftop terrace, winter air biting at his face. 20 stories below, city lights stretched into the distance, oblivious to the drama unfolding above them. Carter stood near the edge, one arm locked around Emma's neck, the other holding a pistol to her temple. "Stay back!" Carter shouted, as Jack appeared, followed moments later by Chen and 2 other agents with weapons drawn. "It's over, Carter," Chen called. "The exits are covered. Your security team is already in custody." "Nothing's over," Carter snarled, tightening his grip on Emma, who winced in pain. "You don't understand what I've built. This foundation does more good with the money than any research ever could." "Those cancer patients?" he continued, edging closer to the rooftop's perimeter. "They would die anyway. At least their money served a useful purpose." Jack took a careful step forward, drawing Carter's attention. "Like my wife?" Carter frowned, momentarily confused. "Who?" "Sarah Reynolds," Jack said, his voice steady despite the rage coursing through him. "She died 3 years ago, believing your foundation would help others with her type of cancer. But you stole even that from her." For a split second, Carter's attention wavered, his grip on Emma loosening just enough. In that moment, Emma reached up and tore the pendant from her neck, throwing it toward Jack before driving her elbow hard into Carter's stomach. The gun went off. Emma crumpled to the ground as FBI agents rushed forward, subduing a struggling Carter. Jack lunged for the pendant, then ran to where Emma lay. Blood spread across her white dress in an expanding crimson stain. "The pen drive," she gasped, clutching at his hand. "It has everything. Evidence of all the schemes." She coughed, a trickle of blood appearing at the corner of her mouth. "I didn't lie about one thing, the compositions. They're for you, Jack." Jack cradled her head as Chen barked orders for medical assistance. The pendant, a hollow locket containing a tiny flash drive, felt impossibly heavy in his palm. "Stay with me," he urged as her eyelids fluttered. "Emma, please stay with me." Paramedics burst onto the rooftop, pushing Jack aside to work on Emma. He stood back, watching helplessly as they stabilized her for transport, his hands stained red with her blood. The world of Jack seemed to freeze, while Emma's body fell onto the cold floor of the terrace, the scarlet blood spreading like a relentless stain through the white fabric of her dress. The ambulance tore through the night, sirens wailing into the darkness as paramedics worked frantically over Emma's still form. Jack sat hunched in the corner, his tuxedo stained dark with her blood, his eyes never leaving her face. The pendant clutched so tightly in his palm that its edges cut into his skin. "BP dropping to 80-50, one paramedic called out, adjusting an IV line. "Pulse is thready. We need to move faster." Jack leaned forward, taking Emma's limp hand between his. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the ambulance's mechanical rhythm. "Fight, Emma. Don't you dare give up now." Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. The oxygen mask fogged slightly with each shallow breath, the only visible sign she was still alive. "Sir, you need to let us work," the paramedic said firmly, maneuvering around Jack's grip on Emma's hand. He reluctantly released her fingers, watching as they fell limply back to the stretcher. The rest of the journey passed in a blur of medical terminology and urgent movements that left Jack feeling helpless, useless, just as he had when Sarah slipped away 3 years ago. The emergency entrance erupted into controlled chaos when the ambulance doors flew open. Emma was whisked away on the stretcher, a doctor already shouting orders as they raced through automatic doors. Jack tried to follow, but found himself held back by a nurse. "Sir, you need to wait here. They're taking her straight to surgery." Left alone in the bright hospital corridor, Jack looked down at his hands, covered in Emma's blood, still clutching the pendant that had cost her so much. He slowly uncurled his fingers, examining the elegant locket. It looked innocent, expensive, but unremarkable, until he pressed the hidden catch Chen had shown him how to release. The pendant split open, revealing a tiny flash drive embedded inside. "Reynolds." Jack turned to see Chen striding toward him, accompanied by a tech carrying a laptop. "Is she—" Chen began. "In surgery. That's all I know." Jack handed over the pendant. "This better be worth it." The FBI agent nodded grimly, passing the device to the technician. "Let's find out." They commandeered a small waiting room, the tech immediately connecting the drive to a secure laptop. Jack paced as files populated the screen. Financial records, recorded conversations, emails, photographs. The evidence of Carter's massive fraud unfolded before them in damning detail. "My God," Chen murmured, scrolling through a spreadsheet. He diverted over $200 million from cancer research grants over the past decade. Jack paused his pacing, leaning over to see the screen. A particular entry caught his eye. A research grant designated for glioblastoma multiforme, Sarah's type of cancer, with over 80% of its funds redirected to an account in the Cayman Islands. "That could have saved her," Jack said quietly, a hollow ache spreading through his chest. "If that money had gone where it was supposed to, Sarah might still be alive." Chen glanced up at him. "We can't know that for sure, Jack." "I can." Jack straightened, turning away from the evidence of Carter's betrayal. Emma risked everything to expose this, not just for her brother, but for everyone who trusted that foundation. Hours passed in the sterile purgatory of the hospital waiting room. The tech continued extracting data from the flash drive, while Chen coordinated with other agents by phone. Jack alternated between restless pacing and sitting with his head in his hands, replaying every moment with Emma since that rainy night in the parking lot. Had she planned everything from the beginning? Used his grief, his loneliness to manipulate him into protecting her? The rational part of his mind said yes, but something deeper, something that had awakened during their time together, refused to believe it was all calculation on her part. A doctor in surgical scrubs finally approached, her face giving nothing away. "Mr. Reynolds, you're here for Emma Lawson?" Jack stood immediately. "Yes, how is she?" The bullet entered her upper shoulder, missing vital organs but causing significant blood loss. "We've managed to remove the bullet and repair the damage." The surgeon's expression softened slightly. She's stable, but still unconscious. Relief washed over Jack like a physical force. Can I see her? Briefly. She's in recovery now and will be moved to intensive care shortly. Jack followed the doctor through a maze of corridors, his heart pounding against his ribs. Chen remained behind, still processing the evidence Emma had risked everything to collect. Emma lay surrounded by machines, tubes connecting her to bags of fluids and monitors that tracked each heartbeat. Her skin was nearly as white as the sheets, making the dark bruising around her eyes more pronounced. She looked smaller somehow, fragile, in a way Jack had never associated with her, even when she'd pretended to be dying. He approached the bed cautiously, as though afraid she might disappear. Her hand, when he took it, was cold but undeniably alive, the pulse in her wrist a subtle reassurance against his fingertips. "I don't know what's real with you," he whispered, studying her face for any reaction. "Every time I think I understand who you are, the ground shifts beneath my feet." A nurse entered, checking Emma's vital signs with practiced efficiency. "The doctor said 5 minutes only," she reminded Jack gently. He nodded, never taking his eyes from Emma's face. "Will she wake up soon?" "Hard to say. Her body's been through significant trauma." The nurse adjusted an IV line. "Talk to her, though. Patients can often hear even when they can't respond." Left alone again, Jack leaned closer. "Emma, I don't know if you can hear me, but they found the evidence. Chen is building the case against Carter right now. You did it." Her eyelids remained still, her breathing measured by the steady rise and fall of her chest. "I'm still angry," he continued, his voice dropping lower. "You lied about everything. Your illness, your ex-husband, who you were. But I understand why now." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I just don't understand why I can't walk away from you, even knowing what I know." The door opened again, this time revealing Chen. The FBI agent's expression was grim but satisfied. "We've got him, Jack. The evidence is rock solid. Carter won't see the outside of a prison for decades." Jack acknowledged the news with a nod. "Any threats to Emma while she's here?" "We've got agents stationed throughout the hospital, and Carter's assets are frozen. His network is collapsing by the minute." Chen approached the bed, looking down at Emma with a mixture of respect and concern. She knew what she was risking, one of the bravest informants I've ever worked with. "When did you recruit her?" "After her brother died. Michael Lawson was part of a clinical trial sponsored by the Carter Foundation. When he passed away, Emma started asking questions, noticed financial irregularities. She came to us instead of going public." Jack absorbed this information, fitting it into the puzzle of who Emma Lawson truly was. "She really is a violinist," Chen nodded. "Graduated from Juilliard. Was building quite a reputation before all this. She used her performances at Carter's events to access records and plant recording devices." "And using me? Was that your idea or hers?" Chen had the decency to look uncomfortable. "When she was attacked in the parking lot, it was genuine. But afterward, when she realized you were Sarah Reynolds' widower, a potential victim of Carter's fraud, she suggested creating a cover story that would keep you close without endangering you with too much knowledge." "The terminal illness," Jack said flatly, "because she knew I'd been through it before." "It wasn't malicious, Jack. She needed protection, and you needed something to care about again." Chen checked his watch. "I need to get back to the office. We're coordinating arrests of Carter's associates across 3 states." After Chen left, Jack remained by Emma's bedside until a nurse gently informed him visiting hours were over. He reluctantly returned to the waiting room, unable to bring himself to leave the hospital entirely. Throughout the night, he dozed fitfully in an uncomfortable chair, waking at every announcement over the intercom. Around 3 a.m., a technician from Chen's team brought him coffee and an update. The evidence from the flash drive had already led to 6 additional arrests, and forensic accountants were tracing millions in diverted funds. Morning brought no change in Emma's condition. Jack was allowed another brief visit, finding her exactly as he'd left her, still unconscious, monitored by machines that beeped reassuringly with each heartbeat. "The doctor says you're stable," he told her, resuming his position beside her bed. "They're cautiously optimistic." He studied her face, searching for the woman who had manipulated him, used his grief as a tool, and finding instead the woman who had played violin at sunrise on the beach, who had shared stories of her childhood, who had looked at him with genuine warmth when she thought he wasn't noticing. "I don't know which parts were real," he confessed, holding her unresponsive hand. "The compositions? Those moments at the cabin? Any of it?" A young doctor entered, chart in hand. "Mr. Reynolds, we're going to run some tests this morning to better assess Ms. Lawson's condition." Jack nodded, rising reluctantly from his chair. "Is there any change?" "Her vital signs are stable, which is positive. However, the trauma and blood loss were significant. We need to be patient." Patient. Jack nearly laughed at the word. Patience had never been his strength. Not as a detective, not during Sarah's illness, certainly not now. He spent the day alternating between Emma's room and the waiting area, where updates from Chen continued to arrive via text message. Carter was being formally charged. The Foundation's accounts were being audited. Whistleblowers from within the organization were coming forward with additional evidence. By evening, Jack's exhaustion was complete. He sat beside Emma's bed, fighting to keep his eyes open, her hand loosely held in his. "You used my pain, my story," he murmured, his voice thick with fatigue. "But why can't I hate you for it?" No answer came except the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Jack finally surrendered to exhaustion, his head dropping forward as sleep overtook him. He didn't see the slight movement of Emma's fingers beneath his, didn't notice the subtle change in her heart rate on the monitor. As if even unconscious, she could sense his presence, and his decision to stay despite everything she'd done. When Jack finally decided to leave the room, convinced that nothing more bound him to this woman who had manipulated his life, Emma's fingers moved slightly, and her lips formed a single, silent word. "Stay." Emma's eyelids fluttered open, the harsh hospital lighting momentarily blinding her. As her vision adjusted, she focused on the figure slumped in the chair beside her bed. Jack. His face creased with exhaustion even in sleep, his hand resting loosely over hers. For a moment she simply watched him, surprised he had stayed despite everything. When she tried to shift position, pain lanced through her shoulder. The small gasp was enough to wake Jack, whose eyes snapped open with the alertness of someone who had spent years responding to emergencies. "You're awake," he said, straightening in the chair. His voice was carefully neutral, betraying neither relief nor anger. Emma swallowed, her throat painfully dry. "How long?" 3 days. Jack reached for the call button. "The doctors need to know you're conscious." The professional detachment in his tone hurt more than the bullet wound. Emma had prepared herself for his anger, his accusations, but this cold indifference was worse. "Jack," she began, but was interrupted by a nurse bustling into the room. What followed was a flurry of medical assessment, vital signs checked, questions about pain levels, neurological tests. Emma answered mechanically, her eyes repeatedly drifting back to Jack, who had stepped back against the wall, arms crossed, face unreadable. When they were finally alone again, the silence stretched between them like a physical barrier. "Why are you still here?" Emma finally asked, her voice stronger now after sips of water. Jack's expression remained guarded. "I'd like to know that myself." He moved forward, reclaiming the chair but not her hand. "Chen says the evidence you collected is solid. Carter and half his executive team are in custody." "Good." Emma closed her eyes briefly. "And David? My ex-husband?" "Still in the psychiatric facility. Chen arranged for improved care now that his connection to the case is clear. Another silence fell, heavier than before. "You know everything now," Emma said, looking directly at him. "Ask me anything you want." Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Was any of it real? Any part of what happened between us?" "Yes." Her answer came without hesitation. Not the brain tumor, not the timeline, but everything else. The music, the stories about my brother, the feelings that developed. Jack's jaw tightened. "You used me from the beginning, manipulated my history with Sarah to keep me close." "I did." Emma didn't flinch from the accusation. "When I realized who you were, that your wife had been treated through one of Carter's programs, it seemed almost destined. The perfect cover. An ex-cop who would protect me without asking too many questions because he understood terminal illness." She struggled to sit up straighter, wincing at the pain. "But what I didn't anticipate was actually caring about you. That wasn't in the FBI playbook." Jack stood abruptly, moving to the window. "You knew exactly what buttons to push. The illness, the fear, the vulnerability, all calculated to make me protective." "At first, yes." Emma watched his rigid back. "But somewhere along the way, I stopped acting. Those days at the cabin, Jack, the sunrise at the beach, I wasn't playing a role then." He turned to face her, skepticism etched in every line of his body. "How convenient. Now that Carter's captured and you need my testimony to strengthen the case, suddenly your feelings were real all along." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "Miss Lawson needs rest. You can continue your visit later." "No," Emma said quickly. "Please, a few more minutes." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Then I'm enforcing rest." After she left, Emma reached for a photograph on the bedside table, a picture of a young man with her same dark hair and clear eyes, smiling broadly into the camera. "This is Michael, my brother." She handed the photo to Jack. "He was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia at 28. The Carter Foundation offered him a place in an experimental treatment program, supposedly cutting edge. We were so grateful, so hopeful." Jack took the photograph, studying the face that shared Emma's features. 6 months later, he was dead. The treatment had actually accelerated his decline. Her voice hardened. "When I started asking questions, looking into the Foundation's research protocols, I discovered there was no actual research happening. The grant money for that specific cancer was being siphoned to offshore accounts." She paused, gathering strength. "Michael died for nothing. Worse than nothing, he died so Royce Carter could buy another yacht." Jack placed the photograph back on the table. "So you went to the FBI?" "Yes. I'd performed at several Foundation events. They helped me develop a cover to get closer to Carter, to gather evidence." Emma met his eyes directly. "I never anticipated the attack in the mall parking lot. That was real. Carter's people had discovered I was accessing restricted financial records. But when you saved me, when I learned who you were, the FBI suggested using that connection." "Using me, you mean?" "Yes." Emma didn't look away from his accusing stare. "But Jack, I swear to you, what developed between us, that wasn't planned. It wasn't fake." Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. "How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? Your entire persona was constructed, Emma. Or is that even your real name?" "It is. Emma Lawson, graduated from Juilliard, concert violinist with a moderately successful career until my brother's death derailed everything." She shifted painfully against the pillows. "The only thing I fabricated was the illness. Everything else, my love for music, my childhood stories, the compositions, that was all real." Before Jack could respond, the nurse returned, this time with clear intention to end the visit. "She needs rest now." Jack nodded, moving toward the door. At the threshold he paused, looking back at Emma's pale form against the hospital sheets. "I'll be back tomorrow." "You don't have to come," she said softly. "I know." With that, he was gone. The following day brought unwelcome visitors. 2 FBI agents Emma didn't recognize arrived as her breakfast tray was being cleared away. "Ms. Lawson, I'm Agent Dawson. This is Agent Kim. We need to discuss security arrangements." Emma set down her juice cup. "Security? Has something happened?" Agent Dawson, a no-nonsense woman with close-cropped hair, pulled a chair beside the bed. "Carter's legal team is working overtime, but that's not our primary concern. We've intercepted communications suggesting some of his associates are planning to ensure you never testify." A chill ran through Emma. "Threats?" "Credible ones." Agent Kim, standing at the foot of the bed, consulted his tablet. "We'll be moving you to a secure location once the doctors clear you for release, which could be as early as tomorrow." "I see." Emma's fingers twisted in the blanket. "Has Mr. Reynolds been informed?" "Agent Chen is briefing him now," Dawson replied. "Given his involvement and potential testimony, Mr. Reynolds will also require protection." The door opened, and a nurse entered with a large bouquet of lilies. "These just arrived for you, Ms. Lawson." The agents exchanged alarmed glances. "Were those screened at the front desk?" Dawson demanded. I don't know," the startled nurse replied. "They came through the normal delivery channel." Agent Kim took the flowers, carefully examining the arrangement before reaching between the blooms and extracting a small black device. "Listening device," he confirmed grimly. "State of the art." The nurse paled. "I had no idea." "It's not your fault," Emma assured her as Dawson immediately called for a security sweep of the entire floor. By the time Jack arrived an hour later, the room had been thoroughly searched, and a uniformed officer had been stationed outside the door. "I hear we have a breach in security," he said, eyeing the discarded flowers now sealed in an evidence bag. Emma nodded. "Carter's associates sent a listening device. The agents think there may be someone inside the hospital working for them." Jack took the seat beside her bed, looking more rested than the previous day. "Chen says they want to move us to a safe house tomorrow if you're cleared for release." "Us?" Emma couldn't hide her surprise. "You're coming too?" "Apparently I'm a crucial witness." He paused. "And I still have some questions for you that I'd prefer to ask away from prying ears." That night, as Emma drifted in and out of medicated sleep, she dreamed of her brother. In the dream, Michael sat beside her hospital bed, healthy and whole again, playing his favorite jazz standards on an invisible saxophone. "You're doing the right thing, Em," Dream Michael told her. "See it through." She woke in darkness, tears on her cheeks, to find Jack asleep in the chair beside her. Sometime during the night, he had returned to her room. In sleep, his face lost its guardedness. The lines of suspicion softened. One hand rested on the edge of her bed, as if he had been holding hers before succumbing to exhaustion. The realization that he had chosen to return, to stand vigil despite his anger and sense of betrayal, brought fresh tears to her eyes. Morning came with the news that Emma was cleared for transfer to the safe house. As nurses helped her dress in clothes Chen had arranged, Jack briefed her on the security plan. "We'll leave through the service entrance. 2 identical vehicles will depart simultaneously. One with us, one with decoys." Emma nodded, wincing as she slipped her injured arm into a sling. "Where are they taking us?" "Chen wouldn't say, even to me. Need-to-know basis." Jack's expression suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with the arrangement. The journey from her room to the waiting vehicle was tense, a team of agents surrounding them as they moved through service corridors and finally out to a loading dock where a black SUV waited, engine running. Only when they were settled in the back seat, pulling away from the hospital, did Emma allow herself to breathe normally again. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for staying. You didn't have to." Jack turned from watching the road behind them. I still don't understand why I did. For the first time, his expression held something beyond anger or suspicion, confusion, vulnerability, and something else Emma dared not name. The safe house, when they arrived after a circuitous journey to avoid tails, was a modest ranch-style home in an unremarkable suburb. Plain furnishings, reinforced doors, minimal windows, functional rather than comfortable. As agents conducted a final sweep, Emma settled carefully onto a living room sofa, exhaustion evident in every movement. "You should rest," Jack said, setting down her small bag of belongings. "I'll check the security perimeter with the agents." "Jack," Emma called as he turned to leave. "When all this is over, the testimony, the trial, do you think we could—" A sudden explosion of gunfire outside cut her off mid-sentence. Jack immediately dropped to a crouch, pulling Emma down to the floor with him. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing a weapon Emma hadn't realized he was carrying. The front window shattered inward as more shots rang out. Through the chaos, Emma heard an agent shouting into his radio, "Breach at the south entrance! We need backup now!" While Emma finally drifted into uneasy sleep under Jack's watchful gaze, in a prison cell miles away, Royce Carter smiled into the phone. "No matter how many guards they assign, you know what to do. She cannot reach the courthouse alive next week. Move." Jack dragged Emma behind the sturdy kitchen island as another burst of gunfire shattered what remained of the front windows. Glass fragments rained across the hardwood floor, glittering like deadly diamonds in the afternoon light. An FBI agent burst through the kitchen doorway, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Back exit's still secure. We need to get you both out now." Jack helped Emma to her feet, careful of her injured shoulder. "What happened to our perimeter security?" "Ambushed," the agent replied grimly. "Professional hit team. At least 5 heavily armed tangos." "How did they find us?" Emma whispered, her face pale with shock and pain. "Questions later," Jack said, drawing his borrowed weapon closer. "Right now we move." They followed the agent through a narrow hallway toward the rear of the house, the sounds of gunfire and shouted commands growing more distant. Outside, an unmarked sedan waited, engine running. "Get in," the agent instructed, scanning the tree line behind the property. "Rendezvous point is 30 miles north. Agent Chen will meet you there." Jack helped Emma into the back seat before sliding behind the wheel. "What about you?" "We'll hold them off. Buy you time." The agent slapped the car roof. "Go, now." Jack didn't need to be told twice. He threw the car into drive and accelerated down the gravel access road, away from the chaos of the compromised safe house. "How did they find us so quickly?" Emma asked again, twisting to look through the rear window. Jack's face was grim as he navigated the rural back roads. Someone talked. The safe house location was supposed to be known only to Chen's team. "You think there's a mole within the FBI?" "It wouldn't be the first time." Jack checked the rearview mirror for the 10th time in as many minutes. Carter has enough money to buy loyalty from almost anyone. They drove in tense silence for nearly an hour, taking multiple detours to ensure they weren't followed. Finally, Jack pulled over at an abandoned gas station, the faded sign creaking in the wind. "We're not going to the rendezvous point," he decided, turning to face Emma. "If there's an informant, it's not safe." "Where will we go then?" Jack considered their options. "I have an old friend from the force, Mike Danton. Left the department years ago, runs a hunting cabin in the northern woods. Off-grid, isolated. No one in the FBI knows about him." "Can you trust him?" "With my life, and more importantly, with yours." Jack pulled out his phone, then thought better of it. "We need a burner phone. They might be tracking our cells." At a roadside convenience store, Jack purchased a cheap prepaid phone while Emma waited in the car, hat pulled low over her face. 10 minutes later, they were back on the road, heading north on country highways. "Mike's expecting us," Jack said after a brief call. "Says we can stay as long as we need." Emma nodded, adjusting her sling with a wince. "Jack, I've been thinking about the safe house. That level of preparation for an attack, they must have known our route, our security protocols. Which means high-level access." Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Someone close to Chen. By nightfall, they reached the turnoff to Mike's property, a barely visible dirt track through dense pine forest. After 5 miles of rough terrain, a small cabin appeared, warm light glowing from its windows. Mike Danton was a bear of a man with a thick gray beard and the weathered hands of someone who had built his own life from scratch. He greeted Jack with a crushing hug before nodding respectfully to Emma. "Got your room ready," he said gruffly. "Not much, but it's secure. No one finds this place unless I want them to." The cabin was rustic, but well-maintained, a testament to Mike's self-sufficiency. A stone fireplace dominated the main room, ringed by comfortable but worn furniture. Gun racks and fishing gear decorated the walls alongside photographs of younger men in police uniforms, Mike and Jack, from another lifetime. "Meal's on the stove," Mike said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "You both look like you could use it." After a hearty dinner of venison stew, Mike showed them to a small bedroom at the back of the cabin. "Only got the one spare room. You'll have to share." Jack and Emma exchanged a glance filled with unspoken complications. "I'll take the floor," Jack offered when Mike had gone. "Don't be ridiculous," Emma replied, gingerly sitting on the edge of the bed. "Your ribs are still healing too. The bed's big enough." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. "I'll check the perimeter," Jack said finally, needing space to think. "Lock the door behind me." Outside, the night was crisp and clear, stars brilliantly visible away from city lights. Jack completed a circuit of the cabin, assessing sightlines and possible security vulnerabilities with the practiced eye of his former profession. Mike joined him, offering a flask of whiskey. "She's pretty." Jack accepted the flask but didn't comment. "And she's got you tied up in knots," Mike continued, unperturbed by Jack's silence. "Want to tell me what's really going on?" Jack took a long swig before answering. "It's complicated. Always is with the pretty ones." Mike chuckled. "But that's not what I meant. The FBI, safe houses, armed goons. Last I heard, you were working mall security." Jack explained the situation. Carter's criminal enterprise, Emma's undercover work, the evidence that could bring down a corrupt empire. He left out the personal complications, but Mike was too perceptive to miss them. "So she lied to you," Mike summarized when Jack finished. "Used you, but then fell for you for real. That's what she claims. And you don't believe her?" Jack stared into the darkness. "I don't know what to believe anymore." "Look at it this way," Mike suggested. "She had plenty of chances to disappear after she got what she needed from you. Instead, she took a bullet, protecting that evidence." He reclaimed his flask. "Actions over words, my friend. Always." The next morning, Jack woke early, surprised to find he had actually slept through the night for the first time since the gala. Emma was still asleep beside him, her dark hair spread across the pillow, face peaceful in repose. In sleep, without the guardedness and calculation that had become second nature to her, she looked like the woman he had started to fall for at the cabin. Vulnerable, real, painfully human. He slipped out of bed carefully, unwilling to disturb her rest. In the kitchen, he found Mike on a ham radio, speaking in clipped tones. "Got a buddy in the state police," Mike explained when he finished. "Says the FBI is conducting an internal investigation. Someone definitely compromised your safe house." "Any leads?" "Nothing concrete yet, but they're looking hard at Agent Richardson." Jack frowned. Richardson. He was on Chen's core team, and apparently living well above his pay grade. New boat, vacation property. Mike poured coffee into a chipped mug. Nothing solid yet, but suspicious timing. Emma appeared in the doorway, her face still drawn with pain but with more color than yesterday. "Good morning?" Mike excused himself with a knowing look at Jack, mumbling something about checking his traps. Left alone, Jack handed Emma a mug of coffee. "How's the shoulder?" "Hurts, but better." She accepted the coffee gratefully. "I heard part of that. Richardson?" Jack nodded. "Possibly our leak. Mike's trying to get more information." They settled at the rough wooden table, the domesticity of the moment at odds with their precarious situation. "Jack, about what I said in the hospital." "We should focus on keeping you alive until the trial," Jack interrupted, not ready for another emotional conversation. "We can sort out the rest later." Emma looked like she wanted to argue but nodded instead. "Fair enough. What's the plan?" "Mike has a contact coming later today, Ramirez." "Your colleague from the mall?" "I trust him. He's bringing supplies and information from Chen through secure channels, no electronic communication." Throughout the day, Jack worked with Mike to improve the cabin's security, setting up early warning systems with fishing line and cans, creating defensive positions, checking the weapons Mike had stockpiled for hunting. Emma insisted on helping despite her injury, demonstrating unexpected practical knowledge. "My brother and I used to camp in the backcountry," she explained when Jack expressed surprise at her ability to set snare alarms. Michael believed everyone should know basic survival skills. The mention of her brother, unguarded and genuine, struck Jack. This wasn't the calculated vulnerability she had shown when pretending to be dying. This was simply Emma sharing a piece of her real history. Ramirez arrived as dusk fell, his normally jovial face serious. After embracing Jack, he nodded respectfully to Emma. "Chen sends his regards," he said, unloading a duffel bag of supplies. "And confirmation that Richardson was the leak. They found offshore accounts linked to Carter's network." "Has he been arrested?" Jack asked. "In the wind," Ramirez replied grimly. "Disappeared yesterday. Chen thinks he'll try to eliminate the threat before trial, meaning you two." "When is the trial?" Emma asked. "Preliminary hearings start Monday, 4 days from now." Ramirez produced a secure satellite phone. "Chen wants you to call him directly on this. Untraceable." That night, a violent thunderstorm knocked out the cabin's generator. By lantern light, Jack and Emma found themselves truly alone for the first time since the hospital, Mike and Ramirez having retreated to the cabin's small loft. "We need to talk," Emma said quietly, her face illuminated by the flickering flame. "Not about us. About what happens if I don't make it to that courthouse." "You will," Jack insisted. "But if I don't," she persisted, "you need to know where all the evidence is. The pen drive was only part of it." Her eyes reflected the lantern's glow as she leaned forward. "I'm not afraid of dying, Jack. I'm afraid of failing, of letting Carter walk free after what he did to Michael, to your wife, to all those patients who trusted his foundation." Jack studied her face, seeing the determination beneath the fear. In that moment, he realized he understood her choices, not just intellectually but emotionally. The need for justice that transcended personal safety, that justified deception when the truth couldn't prevail on its own. "We have to leave now," Jack whispered, pulling Emma close as he reached for his weapon. "There's a traitor among our protectors." The rain pounded against the cabin's roof as Jack and Emma moved silently through the darkness. They had waited until Mike and Ramirez were asleep before slipping out the back door, leaving only a hastily scrawled note. "Can't explain. Trust no one. Will contact when safe." "You think Ramirez is compromised?" Emma whispered as they crouched behind a fallen tree, the forest around them illuminated by occasional lightning flashes. "I don't know," Jack admitted, rainwater streaming down his face. "But the timing of his arrival is too convenient. And he knew exactly where to find us, which means either Mike's contact isn't secure or Mike himself can't be trusted," Emma finished grimly. Jack shook his head. Mike saved my life twice when we were partners. If I can't trust him, I can't trust anyone. Except me? There was a note of cautious hope in her voice. Jack met her eyes in the darkness. Let's just say our interests are currently aligned. They moved through the forest, with only a small flashlight to guide them, heading northeast, toward an old hunting blind Jack remembered from previous visits. The rain provided cover for their noise, but turned the ground treacherous, mud sucking at their boots with each step. Emma stumbled once, her injured shoulder colliding with a tree trunk. She bit back a cry of pain, and Jack caught her before she fell. "We need to stop," he said after steadying her. "You're pushing too hard." "I'm fine," she insisted, though her face was pale and drawn in the flashlight's beam. "The blind is another half-mile. We'll rest there until dawn." The hunting blind was little more than a weathered wooden platform nestled in the branches of a massive oak, but it offered shelter from the worst of the rain. Jack helped Emma up the improvised ladder, then climbed up after her, pulling the ladder up behind them. "Home sweet home," he muttered, unrolling the emergency blanket from his pack. "At least until morning." Emma huddled against the blind's back wall, shivering despite her rain gear. Jack hesitated, then sat beside her, wrapping the thin metallic blanket around them both. Body heat was survival, not intimacy. At least that's what he told himself. "Thank you," she said softly, her damp hair brushing against his chin as she leaned into his warmth. "For still protecting me even after everything." Jack stared out at the rain-drenched forest. "I'm not just protecting you. I'm protecting the case, the evidence." "Of course." Her voice was carefully neutral. They sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the rhythm of the rain on the blind's roof. Finally, Jack spoke. "Tell me about your brother." Emma tensed slightly, then relaxed. "Michael? He was brilliant. Graduated MIT at 20, classical saxophone prodigy, but also the kind of person who could fix anything with duct tape and a paperclip." A smile crept into her voice. "He called it tactical improvisation. Sounds like someone I would have liked." "He would have liked you too." Emma shifted slightly, finding a more comfortable position. "After our parents died, it was just the two of us. He was the sensible one, always looking out for me while I chased my music dreams." Her voice grew softer. "When he got sick, he never complained. Not once. Even when the treatment was obviously making him worse instead of better." She paused. "The night before he died, he made me promise not to give up music. Said the world needed beauty more than vengeance." "But you chose vengeance anyway." "I chose justice," Emma corrected. "After I found the documents showing the foundation had diverted the research money for his treatment protocol, I couldn't just walk away. But I kept playing too. That part wasn't a lie." Jack nodded, understanding better now. "And the compositions you played for me? All mine, all real." Her hand found his in the darkness. "Everything I shared with you about music, about my feelings, that was Emma Lawson, not an FBI informant." Before Jack could respond, a crack of twigs below startled them both into silence. He extinguished the flashlight immediately, drawing his weapon as they held perfectly still. Footsteps circled the base of the tree, followed by a familiar voice. "Reynolds? I know you're up there. It's Ramirez." Jack positioned himself protectively in front of Emma, weapon trained on the opening in the platform floor. "I'm alone," Ramirez continued. "Mike's still at the cabin. Look, I understand why you ran, but you've got it wrong." "Prove it," Jack called back. "The day we met, you were eating a tuna sandwich with pickles and complaining about the night shift. You showed me a picture of Sarah gardening, said it was your favorite memory of her." Jack relaxed slightly, details Carter's people wouldn't know. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I just intercepted a call. Richardson isn't working alone. He's coordinating with someone in Chen's inner circle, someone who knows you're missing from the cabin." They're mobilizing search teams as we speak. Jack and Emma exchanged worried glances. If you're telling the truth, who's the other mole? Don't know yet, but Chen's narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. Ramirez's voice grew urgent. We need to move. Dawn's coming, and they'll have thermal imaging. Mike has a plan to get you safely to the courthouse, but we have to go now. Jack lowered his weapon slightly. If this is a trap, it's not. But every minute we waste puts Emma in more danger. The trial starts Monday, and Carter's getting desperate. After a tense moment of deliberation, Jack lowered the ladder. Ramirez climbed up, soaking wet but visibly relieved to see them both. Mike's furious you didn't trust him, he said, but he understands. He's preparing his old truck, unregistered, off the grid. What's the plan? Emma asked. Get you to a different safe house, one only Chen knows about. From there, secure transport to the courthouse Monday morning. Ramirez checked his watch. We have maybe 20 minutes before anyone realizes I'm gone, too. Dawn was breaking as they made their way back to the cabin through thinning rain. Mike waited by an ancient pickup truck, engine already running. Next time you doubt me, he growled at Jack, just ask instead of disappearing into a storm. No time for hurt feelings, Ramirez interrupted. They'll be looking for the 4 of us together now. Mike nodded. That's why we're splitting up. Ramirez will drive the sedan back toward the city, make them think you're with him. Meanwhile, you 2 will come with me through the back roads. Where are we going? Emma asked. My sister's old place near the state border. Been empty since she moved to Florida. No one knows I still have the key. The impromptu plan had a fragile logic that Jack couldn't fault. They quickly transferred supplies to Mike's truck, and Ramirez prepared to depart in the opposite direction. Be careful, Jack told his former colleague. Ramirez grinned nervously. Always. See you on the other side. As Ramirez's sedan disappeared down the dirt road, Jack helped Emma into the truck's cab, then climbed in beside her. Mike started driving without another word, taking a barely visible trail that wound deeper into the forest before eventually connecting to a series of unmarked logging roads. They drove in tense silence for nearly an hour, the truck's ancient suspension jolting them with every rut and pothole. Emma winced each time they hit a particularly rough patch, her injured shoulder clearly paining her. How much farther? Jack asked as they finally reached paved road. Another hour, maybe less. Mike glanced in the rearview mirror for the 20th time. So far, so good. No tails. The morning sun climbed higher as they wound through backcountry roads, avoiding major highways and towns. Emma dozed against Jack's shoulder, exhaustion finally claiming her. He didn't move despite the cramped quarters, unwilling to disturb what little rest she could find. You care about her, Mike observed quietly. Despite everything. Jack didn't answer immediately. It's complicated. Always is, but sometimes complications are worth it. They were approaching a narrow bridge spanning a river when Mike suddenly tensed. 2 vehicles at the far end, blocking the bridge. Jack carefully shifted Emma upright, waking her. Could be nothing. Road work, maybe. On a Saturday? On this back road? Mike shook his head, slowing the truck. Something's wrong. As they drew closer, Jack could make out 2 black SUVs positioned to block the entire bridge. Men in tactical gear stood beside them. Ambush, he said quietly. Turn around. Now. Mike began a 3-point turn, but before he could complete it, another vehicle appeared behind them. We're boxed in, Emma said, fear evident in her voice. Not yet. Mike accelerated suddenly, heading directly for the narrow shoulder between the bridge railing and the first SUV. Hold on. The truck scraped against the concrete barrier with a horrible grinding noise, metal shrieking as Mike forced it through the narrow gap. Gunfire erupted, bullets pinging off the truck's body. They burst through to the other side, but the truck was badly damaged, steam billowing from under the hood. 100 yards past the bridge, the engine sputtered and died. Out! Jack shouted, grabbing his weapon and the emergency pack. Into the trees! They abandoned the crippled vehicle as their pursuers scrambled to follow. Mike led them down a steep embankment toward the river, moving with surprising agility for his size. "There's an old railroad bridge half a mile downstream," he called over his shoulder. "If we can reach it, we might lose them." They ran along the riverbank, the sounds of pursuit growing closer. Emma kept pace despite her injury, her determination evident in every labored breath. When they rounded a bend and the rusted skeleton of the railroad bridge came into view, Jack felt a moment of hope. The sharp crack of a rifle ended it. Mike stumbled, a red stain blossoming across his shoulder. "Go!" he shouted, pushing them toward the bridge. "I'll hold them off." "We're not leaving you," Jack insisted, reaching for his old friend. Mike shoved him away. "Don't be stupid. She needs to testify. This is bigger than any of us." He pressed his spare weapon into Jack's hand. "Now go, damn it." Jack hesitated, torn between loyalty and duty. "Jack." Emma's voice was steady despite her fear. "He's right. We have to keep moving." With a final nod to his old friend, Jack turned and ran with Emma toward the bridge. Behind them, Mike positioned himself behind a fallen tree, weapon ready. The old railroad bridge swayed alarmingly as they crossed, rotted wooden ties creaking beneath their feet. Halfway across, the distinctive sound of gunfire erupted from the riverbank they'd left. "Mike," Jack whispered, pausing to look back. "We can't help him now," Emma said gently, tugging at his arm. "The best thing we can do is reach that courthouse." They made it to the far side just as a figure appeared on the opposite bank. Not Mike, but a man in tactical gear. Jack pulled Emma into the cover of the trees as bullets splintered the wood around them. For hours, they moved through dense forest, using every evasion technique Jack remembered from his police training. By mid-afternoon, the sounds of pursuit had faded, but they didn't slow their pace. "Do you think Mike—" Emma couldn't finish the question. "He's survived worse," Jack said, hoping it was true. As dusk approached, they reached the edge of a small town. Jack's borrowed phone had no service, leaving them with few options. "We need transportation," he said, surveying the quiet main street from the cover of the trees. "And to contact Chen somehow." Emma nodded, her face streaked with dirt and fatigue, but her eyes still determined. "Whatever happens in there," she said, taking his hand, "I want you to know that what we built in these days, the truth between us, no one can take that from us." A year had passed since the trial that brought down Royce Carter's empire. Spring sunshine filtered through newly installed windows of the renovated community center, catching the dust motes that danced in. The air as a workman carefully mounted a polished wooden sign above the entrance. Sarah Reynolds and Michael Lawson Community Center. Jack stood in the parking lot, hands in his pockets, watching as the final letters were secured in place. The building, once an abandoned recreation center on the edge of town, had been transformed over the past 6 months from a derelict shell into something alive, with purpose. Its rebirth mirrored his own, a thought that still surprised him in quiet moments like this. "Everything looks perfect," Emma said, appearing at his side. Her violin case hung from her good shoulder, the other now fully healed but occasionally still stiff when rain threatened. "They did a beautiful job with the sign." Jack nodded, studying the names that meant so much to both of them. "Sarah would have hated the attention," he said with a small smile, "but she would have loved what we're doing here." Inside, the center hummed with activity. The main lobby had been designed with warm colors and comfortable seating, nothing like the clinical environments that had dominated the last months of Sarah's life. Photographs lined the walls, patients who had survived cancer, families finding support during treatment, and a special section dedicated to those who had been lost to the disease. Jack made his way to his office, where a grief support group would be meeting in an hour. The transition from security guard to counselor had been unexpected, but somehow natural. His own journey through loss had given him insights that textbooks couldn't provide, and helping others navigate their pain had become a calling he never anticipated. From down the hall came the sound of piano music, followed by the lighter notes of a child's hesitant violin. Emma's teaching room was always filled with music these days. After her testimony had helped secure Carter's conviction, she'd declined offers to return to professional performance, choosing instead to teach young cancer patients at the center. "Mr. Reynolds," a young volunteer appeared in his doorway. "The new pamphlets arrived, and there's someone here to see you. Detective Chen." Jack looked up from the file he'd been reviewing. "Send him in." Chen looked different in casual clothes, more approachable without the badge and gun that had defined him during the Carter investigation. He carried a thick folder under one arm, his expression revealing good news, before he spoke a word. "I won't take much of your time," Chen said, settling into the chair across from Jack's desk. "But I thought you'd want to hear this in person. We've recovered another $20 million from Carter's accounts in the Cayman Islands." Jack leaned forward. "More for the Victims Fund?" "Exactly. The court has approved directing a significant portion to your center, given its work with cancer patients affected by the Foundation's fraud." The news should have felt like unmitigated victory. But Jack knew better than most that justice was always bittersweet. No amount of recovered money could bring back those who had died while Carter diverted research funds to his personal accounts. "How's Richardson's trial proceeding?" Jack asked, thinking of the FBI agent whose betrayal had nearly cost Emma her life. Chen's expression darkened. "Pleaded guilty last week, turned state's evidence against the remaining members of Carter's network. Between his testimony and Emma's, we've dismantled the entire operation." After Chen departed, promising to deliver the official paperwork later that week, Jack wandered down the hallway toward the music room. He paused outside the door, watching through the window as Emma guided a young girl's bow hand across violin strings. The child, no more than 8, wearing a colorful headscarf that marked her as a cancer patient, laughed at something Emma said, her face lighting up with pure joy, despite the medical port visible beneath her thin shirt collar. The scene before him embodied everything they'd fought for, not just justice for past wrongs, but the creation of something meaningful from the ashes of tragedy. He watched Emma's gentle patience with the child, seeing the woman he'd come to know over the past year, resilient, compassionate, and unfailingly honest since the day of her testimony. The memory of the trial still surfaced in his dreams sometimes. Emma on the witness stand, pale but composed as she systematically dismantled Carter's empire with precise testimony. The moment when Carter's composed facade finally cracked, his cultured voice rising to a shout as he called her a liar before the judge ordered him removed. And afterward, the quiet hospital room where Emma had asked Jack if he could ever forgive her deception, her eyes filled with uncertainty about their future. Forgiveness had come slowly, built on small moments of truth rather than grand gestures. Emma had never tried to minimize her deception or excuse it away, and that honesty had been the foundation on which they'd gradually reconstructed trust. As the lesson concluded and the child carefully packed away her violin, Emma looked up and noticed Jack at the window. Her smile, unguarded and genuine, still had the power to warm him from within. "Ready for tonight?" she asked when she joined him in the hallway. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied. The small auditorium attached to the center would be hosting its first concert that evening, a benefit performance with Emma as the featured soloist. "Nervous?" Jack asked as they walked together toward the building's rear entrance. "Terrified," she admitted with a small laugh. "It's been a year since I performed for a real audience. What if I've lost whatever talent I had?" "Not possible," Jack assured her, holding the door for her as they stepped into the spring afternoon. "Besides, everyone attending already loves you. They're not coming as critics." They walked the short distance to the apartment they now shared, a modest 2-bedroom unit close enough to the center that they could walk to work most days. It wasn't grand, nothing like the lakeside cabin or the upscale buildings Carter had owned, but it was theirs, filled with books, music, and the careful optimism of two people rebuilding their lives. While Emma practiced in the spare room they'd converted into a music studio, Jack prepared a light dinner, the domestic routine still novel enough to feel like a gift. The simple act of chopping vegetables and hearing violin music from the next room represented a peace he hadn't thought possible 3 years ago when he'd buried Sarah. Later that evening, the center's auditorium filled with community members, donors, and families connected to the programs they'd established. Jack watched from the wings as Emma took the stage in a simple blue dress, her violin gleaming under the lights. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the space. "This center represents many things to many people: healing, community, support. But for me, it represents second chances." She positioned her violin, pausing before continuing. "The piece I'd like to play for you tonight is called Second Breath. I composed it during a time when I believed my life was ending, only to discover it was actually beginning anew." As the first notes filled the auditorium, Jack felt the familiar tightness in his chest that Emma's music always evoked. The melody began with uncertainty, notes questioning and hesitant, before building into something powerful and resilient. He recognized fragments of themes she'd played at the cabin during their time there, pieces he'd thought were merely part of her cover, now woven into an honest expression of their journey. When the final note faded, the audience remained silent for one heartbeat before erupting into applause. Emma acknowledged it with a graceful nod, her eyes finding Jack's in the wings with a private smile meant only for him. After the performance, as guests mingled in the reception area, Jack and Emma slipped outside for a moment of quiet beneath the stars. "That was beautiful," he said, taking her hand as they walked along the center's newly landscaped garden path. "Your best composition yet." "It's the first one I've written without fear or pretense," she replied. "No hidden meanings, no deceptions. Just truth." They stopped beneath an old oak tree, its spring leaves rustling gently in the evening breeze. The question that had hovered between them for weeks finally found its voice. "You really forgave me for doubting you?" Jack asked, turning to face her. "For believing the worst when the evidence pointed that way?" Emma's smile was gentle in the moonlight. "Jack, you saved me twice. Once from a kidnapper and once from the fear of living without love. I think we can say we're even." He laughed, pulling her closer. "You know, for a woman who faked her own death sentence, you're looking remarkably healthy. And for an ex-mall security guard, you turned out to be quite the hero," she replied, rising on tiptoes to kiss him beneath the starlit sky that, for the first time in years, seemed promising for them both. Around them, the newly planted garden was just beginning to take root, like their relationship, requiring patience and care, but offering the promise of something beautiful. Young saplings stood alongside established trees, their different stages of growth complementing rather than competing with each other. As they walked back toward the center, arms linked, Jack reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a rain-soaked parking lot encounter to a rooftop confrontation, through deception and revelation, they had somehow found their way to this moment of genuine connection. They paused at the entrance, looking up at the sign bearing the names of those they had lost. The past would always be with them. Sarah's gentle strength, Michael's brilliant mind, the injustices that had connected them in the first place. But the future stretched before them now, unwritten and full of possibility. While they walked hand in hand toward the future they had built together, Jack and Emma knew that their scars would always exist. But now they told a story of redemption, living proof that even after the deepest pain, the heart finds strength for a second breath.